Yo, welcome to another Untimely review, and we're still going with reviewing every single comic book movie. This time it's about Antman and the Wasp, one of the only two MCU movies I've never seen. So let's see if I should have kept it like that or if I was missing out. So spoilers for the second MCU movie that has T.I. in it. The movie opens up with some off-screen narration from Michael Douglas's character Hank Pym, the first Ant-Man, that moves into a flashback about when him and his wife Janet, the first Wasp, did some superheroing. In the flashback, we see the Wasp go and is believed to be lost in the because of it. This whole monologue is being delivered to his daughter, Hope, the second Wasp. And once we hit present day, he tells her that he's got a plan to bring her mom back. Then boom, we hit our Marvel logo. After that, we pick right up with Scott Lang, the fresh new Ant-Man, playing with his daughter, and the whole sequence is pretty cute, honestly. We meet up with the homie Luis, and it's amazing to see how caring and reckless Scott is with his daughter's safety. And because of his endangering of a non-adult, we find out that he's on house arrest, which is because of him joining up with Captain America back in Civil War. We also find out that the government is looking for Hope and Hank since their tech is the only reason that Scott could even be Ant-Man in the first place. We see Scott's ex-wife and whoever this guy is supposed to be. I mean, they seem nice, but he's got a super punchable face. Once they leave, we get a montage with the song from an extremely goofy movie, this one. And it ends with Scott taking a bath and dreaming of back when he was stuck in the first Ant-Man, but then it morphs into him turning into Janet. He freaks out and then calls Hank. Then, while enjoying a nice late night bowl of cereal, something knocks him out. He wakes up in a car and we see that it's Hope driving it, and for some reason the car is mad tiny. We find out that to get around the whole house arrest issue, they put a sensor on this giant ant because that's how ankle monitors work. Hope takes Scott to the place that she and Hank have been hiding out so they can get the information they need from him. She explains how they've been building a tunnel to the Alright, I feel like I'm going to be saying that a lot, so it doesn't really need to be this loud going forward. Anyway, the reason that they need Scott is because they think that Janet left a message in Scott's head during that trippy little bathroom scene from earlier. They find out she did. Hank shrinks this whole fucking building, and all three of them are going to find the part that they need to make sure the tunnel, now I'm thinking it's more of a gateway, but whatever, is stable enough to travel through. As they leave, we see a mysterious invisible figure. Why do I keep choosing movies with invisible people? Anyway, Hope goes to talk to some dude named Sonny who calls her Susan. Alright, now the parallels are just getting annoying. We find out that he's the one who has the part that they need for the tunnel, and we find out that the guy knows that Hope has been lying to him about her name, and so he gives her an ultimatum. She says no and walks away. She comes back in her Wasp suit, mollywops this guy, and starts taking out the rest of Sonny's men. This dope shit happens. And we finally get introduced to that invisible figure from before who fights against Hope. Hope's getting beat, so Scott joins in. They lose the weird intangible person, and we find out that they captured Hank doing this, which I feel like would just straight up kill him, but then once Scott and Hope get to the van, the guy is missing and so is the lab, which was that huge building that Hank had shrunk earlier. So in their desperate times, they turn to the homie Luis, this guy, and Mr. T.I.P. Harris. After arguing about things that don't matter, they come up with a plan that involves a dude named Bill Foster who worked with Hank back in the day. Then we see that the invisible guy is actually a lady that seems to be phasing between different states of matter with no control that has to rest in this hyperbolic quantum chamber thing. We pick back up with the MCU classic of having characters who need to be undercover wearing sunglasses and a baseball hat, which is actually referenced twice in this movie as being bad, both by Scott and by Bill, since he recognizes Hank across a dark auditorium while giving a lecture. When they all get to talking, Bill and Scott compare how big they could get. Pause. But just as they get to the important part of the conversation, the FBI seems to attract Scott, so they have to dip out. In the van ride away, we see that Scott lied to Hank and Hope about destroying his old suit. They go to find it, but because Scott put it in a place that he shouldn't have, now his daughter has it. And because the new suit is malfunctioning, Scott's the size of a toddler now. They get the old suit, no problem, and Hank is able to track the lab down to the invisible lady, Ghost's hideout. They try to take the lab back, but Ghost wakes up from her beauty sleep and knocks both Hope and Scott out. Once Scott comes to, we find out Ghost's real name is Ava, and that her suit helps her control her powers. She seems very nice, if a little suggestive towards Scott, and just straight up rude to Hope and Hank. Which does make sense since we learn that she has beef with Hank and that Bill is actually working with Ava, and we get her extremely tragic backstory, along with why Bill is helping Ava, and it's all pretty compelling stuff, but because it's a Marvel movie, we can't have too much sadness, so Scott's duck ringtone cuts the tension. Anyway, Bill and Ava seem to have a solid plan, but Hank is kind of a dick, so he's not even really trying to hear it. And this next scene is played as a smart move by Hank, and it is, but he fakes heart issues so that Bill will try to give him some medication, but it's a trick and some giant ants pop out. Then the subplot that I didn't think I even needed to mention about Scott's security proposal is brought up again from Luis, and that guy Sonny Birch comes to interrogate him. We check back up on Ava and Bill, and because Bill tells her that the containment unit isn't as helpful, she gets desperate and threatens to kidnap Scott's daughter, but Bill talks her out of it. Pick back up with Luis, who goes on this amazing and long-winded recap that pretty much sums up everything you need to know about Antman, and Ava somehow knows to go to the place that Luis is being interrogated at and gets the information about where the lab is. Then we check in on the Ant Gang, and Janet mind transfer jutsus into Scott's body to fix the machine after something goes wrong with it. Once Scott's back in his body, he gets a call from Luis tipping him off that both Ava and the FBI are on their way to them. Scott gets back home in time, but Hope and Hank get caught and Ava kills this guy to get the lab back. We get a nice scene between Scott and his daughter. Hope and Hank escape from the FBI with Scott's help and they track the lab using ants. Because he's Ant-Man, remember? Anyway, the Ant Gang, trademark CM, gets to the lab and find Ava and Bill attempting to siphon off some quantum energy to cure Ava. Some stuff happens, the Ant Gang make their move to stop Ava and Bill. Hank promises to help Ava once he's found his wife. Seems like a lie, but there's still 40 minutes left, what the fuck? Scott and Ava fight and Hank makes the dive into the quantum realm. Sonny pops up again and then some Fast and the Furious type shit happens. Hank gets stuck in the quantum realm for a little bit. We get a Stan Lee cameo where he laments his heavy drug use in the 60s and a giant Pez dispenser is used as a weapon. So far, pretty good stuff. After some more action, we see Hank going into the quantum kaleidoscope. The funniest part of the movie happens. Hank looks like he's playing Journey to the Savage Planet, and even though he has a mental breakdown, Janet finds him and they reunite. Because Scott went supermassive, he passes out and Hope goes to save him, leaving Luis to get the lab. So of course, Ava takes it from him and embiggens it. Scott wakes up from being unconscious. Sonny makes a racist jab at Luis, and we see Ava starting up the tunnel. But before it's finished, Scott and Hope stop the machine and they fight until Hank and Janet come through the tunnel, barreling right into Ava. The reunion the whole movie has been building up to happens, and Janet cures Ava with her quantum powers. Scott gets back home before the FBI 2 days in a row now, and his house arrest sentence is over. We get another happy montage using the same extremely goofy movie song, and the movie ends with Cassie, Scott's daughter, who I forgot to mention by name, but now seemed a good time, Scott and Hope recreating a drive-in, but tiny. The end credit scene shows the Ant Gang, trademark CM is mine, sending Scott to the quantum realm to get some particles for Ava to help her heal, but they turn to ash because of the whole Infinity War situation, and Scott is stuck in the quantum realm. There's another post-credit scene about a drumming ant, but who cares? Well, now that the story's out of the way, what did I think? Overall, I enjoyed it, but it's far from one of my favorite Marvel movies for a couple of reasons, but let's start with love first. So I haven't watched a good superhero movie that I thought was genuinely funny in a while, but this one worked pretty well for me. Michael Pena as Luis is great anytime he's on screen, and Paul Rudd is a national treasure at this point. However, the jokes can feel forced in places and does contribute to one of my negatives, but on the topic of acting, I think everyone does a great job. Michael Douglas plays a dickhead Hank Pym really well, and considering that I only know him to be a wife beater and creator of Ultron in the comics, I think it's a fine adaptation. Evangeline Lilly is fine. I don't really think they do too much with her character at all, but it's fine. Walton Goggins, whose name I said mainly because it's funny to hear, plays a southern guy pretty well too. But this movie wouldn't work at all without Paul Rudd. When the first Ant-Man came out, I liked it, but I wasn't really on the Paul Rudd train. After this and his show on Netflix, I get it now. Dude seems like the nicest and most charismatic guy, and it just really seems like the directors just let him be himself, which is great to see. The other thing that's amazing to see has to be the different perspective shots where characters are enlarged or really small. Like the first scene where we see the car that's super tiny honestly blew me away, but I'm a simple boy, so that makes sense. Seeing the actual transformations, which happens a lot, especially with Evangeline's character, is really awesome, and it doesn't look like someone just resizing a bunch of stuff. But now let's talk about the things that I didn't really like. The first being how long this movie is and how long it feels. Pause.
For sure. Whoa, shit.
So Ant-Man and the Wasp clocks in at just under 2 hours, but watching it felt like there was an extra hour wedged in there somewhere. And part of that dragging comes from how some of the jokes are paced and their placement. There isn't a single time where an emotional scene is given time to breathe. We have an emotional reunion, boom, joke. There's a tense scene about buying some tech, boom, joke. There's specific scenes like the ants being eaten or the recalibration scene that just go on for way too long. And these unnecessary scenes really add to the bloated runtime. I get that we need to cut some tension since these types of movies are supposed to be lighthearted, but man, it feels like so many of them don't actually add anything. Speaking of not adding anything, outside of how this movie fits into the MCU as a whole, what was really the point of this movie? At the end, pretty much everybody except Sonny gets what they want, even if they were in the wrong multiple times. Hank gets his wife back, even though he was so focused on that he was unconcerned about helping Ava, which is, you know, what a good person would do. Ava gets cured, and yeah, sure, her health is ambiguous at the end, but we really don't even know what happened to her. Even though I think that Scott was constantly trying to do the right thing, he still commits mad crimes, and it doesn't matter. By the way, all of that was in context of just the movie and not the other 2 post-credit scenes for 2 reasons. 1, I only care about this movie in isolation, and 2, even after Endgame, where, spoilers, everyone is brought back, we don't see any changes to Scott, like at all, so it's not like it really matters. The main thing I think that is worth watching this movie for is the relationship between Scott and Cassie. I think the father-daughter thing, which isn't that big a part of the movie, is still the best in terms of the storytelling and just the chemistry between the 2 actors. Overall, I think Ant-Man and the Wasp is a good movie for background noise since the story isn't really all that interesting, and aside from some of the dope special effects, it's solid, but forgettable. So what did you think? Did my review come up a little short, or was it just the right size? What should I review next? Let me know in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.